Welcome back, everybody, to Into the Gauntlet Episode 2. Today we're going to be talking about Machina's Peep Game. Okay, so if you haven't heard of the Mastering Gauntlet before, this is a challenge that I hosted during the month of September with a competing mastering engineer, Christian Casito of Envious Audio. This guy is a great mastering engineer, you should go check him out. Anyway, the song that we're doing today is based on a mastering session from this Gauntlet submission, Machina, Peep Game. Go check it. We're going to dive in, and today I'm going to show you a little bit of A-B comparisons between my master and Christian's. So from there, we're going to talk about some mix tips based on what they did well, what they could do better, and then also some lessons that I learned. And this is some critical points because, let's face it, we're always learning, or at least you should be. If you're not learning, you're doomed to repeat the same thing over and over. At least that's what I hear. So let's dive in and let's take a listen. So as usual, I start by doing all my documentation, setting up the preferences, setting up my track, getting everything in my template set up for ingesting. And then I set to work looking for references. Now for me, the more time I spend on references, I tend to toe that line between just listening for enjoyment, but I'm listening for key things. And when I'm looking for references, I'm looking more for my tastes, things that are going to inform my decisions as a mastering engineer on what I believe the market they're trying to hit. Because the artist, again, we don't have any pretext as to their assumptions or their intent. And after this, I started getting to work analyzing. I used two analyzers. One is the Uline loudness meter, and the other one is Voxengo Span Plus. Together, these give me a really good idea, an encapsulating idea overall of where my guide tracks are and where my actual mix is at. And then I could set to work with my mastering chains. So right away, I started sculpting them pretty quickly. I'm able to move through my chain really fast. And I do a lot of EQ work and massaging the chain, gain staging everything to get it starting to hit roughly where I think that perception of punch is right at that peak, and then I can't push it anymore. It's like a rubber band, and if you stretch it any further, it just breaks. So then I back off a little bit and we give it some little bit of wiggle room. And that's what I'm doing with all of that gain staging. And then starting to massage the track into that gain staging with EQ changes and correction, and EQ changes that have to do with overall broad strokes or getting the contour set up the way that I think that it would really benefit the track. But then after I take my break, you'll notice when I come back, I'm actually doing something with a second chain. And I like to have at least two options. So when I do the second chain, this is with my other chain, the Cakewalk Pro channel module setup that I gave away in my preset pack. You'll notice, go onto my previous YouTube channel or my previous YouTube videos, you can find how do you master with stock plugins in Cakewalk and Ableton. I cover both of them, and I try to recreate my chain with just stock plugins, and I was pleasantly surprised by the results that this chain got. Now, here's where I diverged from that, because I added Elevate, which was another, I think it's Newfangled Audio. They released this as like a multi-band limiter. I put this after the Pro Channel Concrete limiter. And I'm doing some further sculpting to enhance the low end of the mix. But you'll notice I jump back at this point. Now I'm doing further massaging with my first chain. So I'm going back and forth. I'm trying to get two options going. And I finally do some automation with stereo width. And this is something that, for me, I like to do to enhance the storytelling of the song. If we can increase contrast in certain areas that do need it, this is pretty typical of electronic dance music. There is everything in the kitchen sink thrown into the production. And there are no quiet spots or anything, or it's a very little variation in perceived volume between those spots. But we as mastering engineers can help enhance those sections, automating things like threshold, attack times and release times, and even our limiters, backing off just where we need to allow the track to breathe more. Now that does change your gain structure, but we can also do things with stereo width in a similar manner, and that's what I did here. So there you have it, folks. I believe I submitted that track with just minutes to spare because I spent more time doing two separate chains at the end of the day, I still had to listen to which chain I think I wanted to submit over the other one, and then I rendered both out, listened again, played in SoundForge, and then from there, I did my upload. So I'm going to start off with Christian's master. That's the top one here. And let's get started on just a couple of key spots. Did you notice something?
I have special eyes.
Look with your special eyes.
No, I noticed it. And that is, my master's playing at -2.5. So I had to turn it down so we could get a volume match comparison going on. Excuse me. Dry throat. Anyway, you can tell mine's quite a bit louder than his, and his is peaking at -0.4, and that's with some, like I actually set the gain to 0.6. So let me just reset those and let's hear those again. Wow. There's a lot to unpack here, and that is, first off, I've stated it before, but I have a very different approach from Christian. Now, Christian comes from a very conservative school, school of thought. At least that's what the perception is here. And the school of thought that I'm talking about is do no harm, meaning that we're trying to be transparent and lift the track within what we believe should be a decent amount of gain. You know, try to make it competitive, but you're not trying to change the you're not trying to change the mix into something else. I will say this, I have my own approach, and that is to try to enhance the master with my chain that I'm doing, and I've been honing this one for years, and I believe this has to do with EDM specifically. You're not going to find as many mastering engineers willing to do this much sculpting and this much changing of the signal to sound pleasing based on my own taste. It has to do with the market. And so let me dive into that. This can almost come into a mixed tip for the artist as well, but I want you to pay attention to a few key things. Let me just go straight to the drop where motif 1 is, and I'll play it back from mine first. I want you to listen to the low end and listen to see if it sounds like there's distortion happening, and we'll see what's happening there. You notice it sounds like there's distortion, but it's actually a separate layer. There's an element of a very low synth that's adding this top end texture, this gritty sound buried just beneath the sub. And the sub actually stays pretty clean, even in my master here. So what's happening is, as we increase our perceived loudness, there is a point where we start to reveal everything in the mix. The louder we try to hit it, the more critical you have to be of your mix structure. Because if there's stuff that you don't want to be that apparent, and you're not aware of just how loud your master is going to get pushed, this is a shot in the dark for me. It's a shot in the dark for Christian about our approaches, because we're not able to talk to the artist. We don't have any set expectations or intention of what the artist's goal is. So we're both doing a lot of assumptions on our part. Now, my assumption is I want this track to stack up next to references. So let's take a look at the mix set, or the actual mastering session, and I'll show you my mix template, or excuse me, my mastering template. I'm doing a lot of mixing apparently. Okay, so you can see in reference 1, I have Dead Mouse, some chords, and the second reference is Vibrosphere Autumn Lights. Now, two very different styles of music, but I feel like there was a cohesive takeaway between the two tracks that I was trying to use for perceiving the way that I want, or the way that I think the market might respond to Peep Game. Let's listen to the mix. Very cool. So my mastering chain was able to do quite a bit of lift, and if we pay attention to the kick, at some points it feels like the kick is just distorting, but it's actually not. And that has to do with the way that the kick is intermodulating with the sub. And this is something that I like to bring up, but there's another key point here, and that is transient headroom. And let's compare it to Dead Mouse, some chords, because if you notice, in some chords, there's actually some transients. There's a range of transients above the mix that still stick out. And that perception of punch is actually built into the mix. And that allows the master to get it loud while still retaining that perception of dynamics in there. I think a bigger lesson here is when you listen to those elements that I was talking about competing in that same range, those textural elements. And when we see that this track is actually peaking at -6, I'm not worried about overall headroom. I'm talking about transient range. So if we get more range to work with transients, it then becomes about shaping them, meaning the speed at which we're causing them to duck the signal to create sustain or thickness. And there's a lot of things that go on at play. So it just takes experimentation and understanding what a mastering chain that's designed to get loud can do to a mix like this. A mix designed to be loud isn't going to sound polished just listening to the mix by itself. That's a key tip. That mix is going to sound weird when you don't listen to it with any mastering. So if you want to start mastering yourself at home, work with a mastering chain already set up and mix into it. And bring in some commercial references, bring in already mastered material. Now the other trick is you'll hear often that you should bring that reference mix or that reference master down in volume until it matches roughly your mix level, which is also deceiving because you're basing your mix assumptions without any mastering applied and that's going to throw off your gauging how the perception of punch and impact actually should be stacking up your volume changes and volume structure with things that have more transients in them, or like a wider gamut of transient range. And so that's a really big takeaway I think you guys should definitely take home with you. Practice and experiment. Practice and experiment with a mastering chain applied. Practice and experiment with references. So that's what I want to leave you guys with today. And I, as a mastering engineer, still had some lessons that I walked away with because I believe they still chose Christians over mine. There's nothing wrong with that because at the end of the day, this is still a shot in the dark. I have to stick to my gut and believe that what I am doing to serve the artist is going to be there. Now, I'm not going to be for everybody. I'm going to be for a few, and that's okay. I'm not trying to be for everybody. My approach is to try to give them the best result that I believe is possible for the audience they're trying to reach. And in today's market, that has to deal with a lot of really loud masters. Now, we still hit like -8, -9, and that's not going to compete with the -5s out there, but we still want that balance of dynamics where there's headroom with it. Which brings me to another point. If you guys have questions on mastering and dynamics and punch, how do I release for streaming, how do I release for CD, stuff like that, let me know in the comments below and I'll try to address them next episode. So there you have it, folks. Thanks so much for sticking with me throughout this whole thing. I already mentioned if you have questions, and here's my big ask. If you want to see more content like this, I believe I'm only going to be able to do this for the next couple of months. I promised 16 episodes, but that's going to take way more than 2 months to do. and I've only got 2 months to get this thing off the ground. So if you guys want to see more content like this, please head to my Patreon page, link below, and consider subscribing or donating, because that's going to be what helps us grow this thing, and I can give you guys even more information to help you achieve your goals and your dreams. So if you like more of this content, the other thing that I'd like to ask of you is, what more perks would you guys like to see for that membership? I know you guys would be donating at least $5 a month. I've added a new tier where $50 a month gets you at least 1 coaching or mastering session with me. That's all provided in that $50. There's some great perks involved. I've been coaching a lot of artists, and we're already starting to see a lot of success take off. Kudos to Zach Falls, because I believe his last remix that we touched on in the Cakewalk episode started getting worldwide attention. That's right, it was played by an international radio station, so he's getting some major attention behind him. The thing that I want you guys to take away from this is anybody can do it. It's not that he had some special sauce, it's not that I was the determining factor, or that he had a perfect song or a perfect mix. It was just a great song, and that can happen to you too. So thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time, happy productions. Oh, and by the way, hit that like button, subscribe, and ding that bell to get notified next time I release the episode. All right, take care.